Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Gene Coltas, presiding member for today's Regional Development Assessment Panel meeting. I'll declare the meeting open at 9:33 a.m. and in doing so, I acknowledge we're hosting this meeting on the traditional land of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation and are joined by people from other lands around the state. We acknowledge the Aboriginal people as the traditional custodians of Western Australia, pay respect to elders past and present and the ongoing connection between people, land, waters and community. This meeting we run in accordance with RDAP Standing Orders 2024 under the Planning and Development Assessment Panel Regulation of 2011. Meetings being recorded and live streamed on the RDAP website in accordance with Regulation 42A of the Planning and Development Assessment Panel Regulations 2011, and members are reminded to announce their name and title prior to speaking. Panel members may refer to technical devices throughout the meeting to assist them in considering information before them. On the panel today with me are Councillor Anne Ryan from the City of Busselton, Councillor Kate Cox from the City of Busselton, to my left, Karen Hyde, Deputy Presiding Member, and Mr. Mike Moritz, Specialist Member. Item 2 on the agenda is apologies, we have none. Item 3, members on leave of absence, there are none. And item 4, noting of previous minutes, which are available on the DAP website. We're here in Part B of the agenda to consider an application with the City of Busselton, and Item 1, I'll ask all panel members to confirm that they've considered all of the documentation within Part B of the agenda and Part B related information by raising their hand, please. Thank you. Disclosures of interests. Are there any interests to be declared by members? I will ask the councillors if this matter has been considered at a council meeting at all.
No, it's not.
Okay, thank you. We're here to consider the application for a group housing development with communal facilities for over 55s at Lot 31 Rendezvous Road, Bass. We do have a number of presenters this morning, and I will ask the presenters to focus on the main aspects of their verbal presentation within a designated 3-minute time frame, and panel members will be invited to ask questions of the presenters after each presentation. The first presenter we have on the agenda is Mr. John Hammond. Mr. Hammond, would you like to make your presentation, please?
Yes, thank you. This is our presentation to oppose the proposed development. Traffic impact. The total traffic impact on Tortoise Rise is not accurate, as the estimated number of cars coming through daily does not include traffic from the future developments on the east side of Heron Lake via Benjar Grove, including Stage 3 Heron Lake, the Woods Estate, the current development on Nash Drive, and any traffic coming via Rendezvous Road. Traffic generated from visitors to the 500 plus new residents must also be accounted for in the traffic report. The actual traffic of all existing and planned surrounding estates will largely surpass the estimation given in the developer's traffic report and the maximum of 3,000 cars allowed every day. Tortoise Rise was initially designed to support the traffic of Heron Lake private estate only. People aged 55 years and over are still in the workforce for 10 to 15 years, if not more, which again makes the estimated peak hour traffic incorrect. Heron Lake Estate and Birchfield Estate are primarily family estates with a large population of young children travelling to and from school and crossing Cockatoo Loop and Tortoise Rise daily. Therefore, the safety of our children will significantly be compromised with such large volumes of traffic. The blind corner on Cockatoo Loop reduces visibility, and the narrow roads, especially Tortoise Rise, are not designed to accommodate the predicted increased traffic volume, including caravans that many people in lifestyle villages own. Existing driveways on Cockatoo Loop directly in front of the proposed ingress-egress road and all the way to Tortoise Rise will make it extremely difficult and dangerous to enter and depart our own homes. Our driveway personally at 62 Cockatoo Loop was positioned specifically on the west side after the recommendation from the Busselton Shire and our builder to provide a safer exit point, which will then lose its purpose entirely should the ingress-egress road be built directly in front of it. Ingress egress should only be on Rendezvous Road to provide safety and eliminate the need to cut down the trees. Ingress egress on Rendezvous was approved for the Woods estate, and the future estate on Nash Drive will have similar access. Future estates on the west side of the proposed development also show ingress egress on Rendezvous Road only. Therefore, an ingress egress on Rendezvous Road for this proposed development is the logical option. This option will not only spare increased traffic to Cockatoo Loop and Tortoise Rise, but also all the way to Bass Village and the already busy entrance exit to Birchfield Estate and onto Busselton Bypass. A lifestyle residence already exists in Bass Village, which everyone welcomed in the past, as it made sense to provide a facility near all the amenities the village offers. It's a walkable distance to these amenities and does not impact traffic and safety, as it was planned from the beginning of the construction of Bass Village. Due to its remote location in comparison to Bass Village, this development will isolate 500 plus new age residents who will need to drive in and out daily. 500 plus age residents in the southwest will increase the burden on an already overtaxed healthcare system. Hospital wards are running at capacity. GP practices cannot take new patients in many cases. There are limited nursing home placements and respite placements available in the southwest. I am a clinical nurse at Busselton Health Campus with 16 years experience, and I know that over 55s are the largest consumers of healthcare. It's also relevant to note that the aged care assessment team has a backlog of over 400 cases yet to be assessed. With only semi-rural and large blocks along Rendezvous Road, this proposed development does not align with the area. It seems the developer is willing to create a town with potentially over 500 new residents crammed together without considering the impact on infrastructure alone. If this land is developed, it should be done to spare existing trees, provide large blocks to the woods, similar to the Woods estate, to suit the area and minimise the impact on urbanisation on wildlife. According to the plan of the developer, many native trees will need to be cut down to create the ingress egress on Cockatoo Loop. This could easily be avoided by changing the location to Rendezvous Road, which would not require any tree felling. The number of southwest snake-necked turtles is diminishing rapidly. The ringtail possum is an endangered species and will suffer further decimation should this plan go ahead. The water management is an issue. Living directly across from this proposed development, we witnessed this land turn into a lake for several months every winter. Tortoise Rise is sandwiched between wetland reserves and floods every winter to the point where smaller cars can barely drive through Tortoise Rise. Heron Lake was sold to its residents as a private estate. Opening all surrounding estates onto ours doesn't make it private anymore. This will affect our property value considerably. We pay some of the highest rates in the area. The proposed site was farmland and was never intended to be developed, and certainly not to this extent. In conclusion, I'd like you to consider that we bought our blocks to create homes for our children, to provide our families with a lifestyle that is in harmony with nature and a peaceful existence. We're not wealthy people, and the residents of Heron Lake have worked and sacrificed to have this lifestyle. We want our children to be safe. We understand the need for development and housing, but it must be done in a way that preserves the existing environment and wildlife and is in alignment with existing developments. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I allowed you to go a little bit longer, but thank you for your presentation. Panel members, any of you have questions of Mr. Hammond?
No, thank you.
No, thank you.
No? Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Hammond. Our next presenter is Karina McMillan. Karina, would you like to make your presentation? We have read your presentation, so if you want to just concentrate on the main points, that would be fine. Thank you.
Thank you, John, and good morning, councillors and panel members. Appreciate the time to respond to the development application. It will be difficult to get this in 3 minutes, but I'll try my best. So I am representing my family and as the current owner and caretakers of a Category 1 heritage listed property, Fernbrook Farm, on Rendezvous Road, Vass, a 1890s property and cottage held by the Dawson family for 5 generations. So I represent that as well. I would like to oppose the proposed development in its current form based on a number of significant concerns, starting with orderly and proper planning. There's a lot in there. I will focus on a few key points. Basically, it leans into the responsible authority report, noting special provision 4, and that is a special control area requiring structured planning to address environmental values across multiple lots, including the subject site, and that's a key, multiple lots. The purpose of the structured planning is to interrogate development, whether that is because there are multiple sites under consideration or multiple landowners, or the development is to be staged. The requirement for structure planning ensures that the surrounding land and its occupants will not be burdened or prejudiced by an earlier decision. Interrogation covers several factors, including but not limited to road network servicing and preservation of environmental values. In this case, it is the preservation of environmental values that was previously deemed by the EPA, and the city essentially, as is reflected in the special provision 4. So the provision establishes that a structure plan is to be prepared for the whole area, and point 2 specifically states that the lots within the area contain important environmental values, including remnant vegetation, potential habitat for Commonwealth and state-listed threatened fauna species, ecological linkages and wetlands. Structure planning shall require these values to be retained, managed and protected for conservation purposes. The development proposal addresses the environmental values in part, for example, through the retention of some mature trees and the construction environmental management plan, but it does not consider the impact of the broader area, and that's a key point. We note that a level of understanding seems to have been reached with DBCA. However, the applicant outright dismisses DBCA's comments that the resource enhancement wetland has recently been evaluated as high value, another key point. The presence of the southwestern snakeneck turtle, as per my attachments, hopefully you've all got a copy of that. There is clear evidence of the turtles in the area, especially on my property and on Rendezvous Road Crossing. And the need for habitat and ecological linkages is not discussed as a priority because this species is not listed as threatened. It seems incredible that a species is known to be in decline and therefore being researched, yet it will be dismissed until such time that it's actually a listed threatened species. The applicant also dismisses DBCA's commentary on referral under the EPBC Act, stating that the proponents have satisfied themselves with regard to their obligations because clearing would not result in a significant environmental action. And yet the environmental report references the out-of-date 2017 version of the referral guidelines, the 3 threatened black cockatoo species. The 22 guidelines in Table 3 indicate that the loss of any potential nesting trees would be classed as a significant action. In this development, 9 potential nesting trees will be removed. Sometimes there's not a lot to guide orderly and proper planning. In this instance, we have proposed land use that is not listed in the scheme and then therefore subject to no development standards or guidance. We must therefore rely on the zone objectives, of which is to provide a basis for structure planning, and the special control area, which is special provision 4, which then goes on to require a structure plan. So my question is, why is this being ignored? As a landowner who lives directly opposite the subject site, I have witnessed, indeed have evidence of, the environmental values of this site. It is incredible that it will not be considered in a more holistic manner across the broader area. I'm also aware of a Supreme Court decision, George versus Anna versus the Shire of Irwin. In that case, the Shire had approved a development application. Judge Seawood found that a jurisdictional error had been made because the development was inconsistent with development requirements prescribed in the scheme. The approval was quashed. I asked the panel to consider whether legitimate approval can be issued for this proposed development, given that the prescribed development requirements have not been complied with. There is some matters to do with heritage as well, non-Indigenous and Indigenous. The Southwest Design Review Panel provides a note that consultation with the Carrick Aboriginal Corporation had not commenced. There is no discussion about this in the RA, and I would like to know whether the applicant has complied with the requirements of the Aboriginal Cultural Act 1972 as amended in May 24. It is our understanding that there are Aboriginal objects and cultural materials within the vicinity, and this should be investigated prior to any development. Water management, another serious consideration. We note that of the conditions 3.10 in the RA, there is a requirement for a revised water management plan to be submitted and approved by the city in consultation with DEWA. We need to know how the changes to the water management plan will affect all neighbouring properties and whether it will mitigate the flooding risks given the impact of the development to the resource enhancement wetland. The past 2 winters have brought flooding to our property, the neighbouring properties, and Rendezvous Road, all of which drain and flow directly into the resource enhancement wetland. And I have got attachments of evidence of those floods. In conclusion, we are fully aware that the 3 development pathways that the applicant could have pursued. We are also aware of an application that has been refused by RDAP, which has later been lodged with the State Development Assessment Unit. We know that the SDAU is not bound in its decision-making to a local planning scheme. Despite this, we believe that the DAP is bound and therefore respectfully request that the points raised above are given careful consideration prior to a decision being made. Thank you.
Thank you, Karina. Panel members, are there any questions of Karina at this stage?
No, thank you. No,
Okay,
Thank you.
okay, thank you, Karina. Our next presenter is Kate Reading. Kate, I believe you're at the Shire of Busselton.
Correct, John. No, you're not John.
No, I'm not, but you can call me John if you want.
I think it's Eugene.
Thank you very much. Yes, please start. Once again, we have read your submission. You have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't intend reading my own submission. I know that you're perfectly capable of doing that. I'd like to just highlight a couple of the areas and congratulate both John and Karina on the points that they've made. John on the traffic and the hospital future aspects of this proposal, and Karina with regard to the animals. Anyone who's aware and has seen the structure plan for VAS is aware of how very well planned VAS has been. I married into the family in 1969, having a city background, not WA, and I couldn't believe how proud the people of VAS are of their area. At that stage, the population was about 100 people, but the people of VAS have always helped each other, and they've worked together, and they worked strongly on the VAS Newtown development. 3 generations of the family have been heavily involved in community work and have been active to shape both VAS and Busselton, and I've listed the roles within Busselton and VAS that various ones of us have held positions in. I was a Busselton councillor from the late 70s to the mid-80s. I was always very proud of that. I found it very stimulating. So I congratulate you, Anne, on your long work. I know that it's often thankless. With regard to the environment, Karina referred to what she referred to. I'd like to talk about the black cockatoos. We've lived on our farm for 126 years. And when I first married, there were large flocks of mostly white-tailed black cockatoos with red tails as well. And they were a feature because they were so noisy. In the recent last couple of years, I can count the numbers of flocks that go by, and there's usually only 5 or 6 or maybe 10 black cockatoos. This is a huge loss. And anything that destroys their food trees, their nesting trees, or their habitat, we have to be aware of. The other thing that hasn't been mentioned is frogs. When I first lived at Birchfields, we had the moaning frogs, and you'd hear them of an evening, just their voices just moaning away down in the wetlands below our house. There are numerous types of local birds that both visited our garden and the whole area, and those numbers have diminished enormously. Tree planting is vital, and I note from the plan that was lodged for this application, this proposal, there's minimal trees around the edges, and I really don't understand why there's not more. I draw your attention, I don't know whether you can see it, to the map of Heron Lake that I attached to my submission. And the reason I did that was because there's 60 lots on that Heron Lake subdivision. They also refer to the south of the division. There's quite a lot of green wetland labelled for conservation. I'm surprised that if all of that conservation land contains water that flows through Lot 31 and then onto our place, which is on the western boundary of Lot 31. So I'm very familiar with this land, and that's why I included the photograph that I took last week showing very lush growth on the side of Rendezvous Road. I was standing with my back to Karina's house, and you can see that at the end of a really dry summer, there's lush grass on that area, and you can see further greenery in the inside. If you drive down Rendezvous Road, you won't see any green like that. We used to run our cattle on this land because in summer it provided feed. I've taken photographs in 2017, 19 and 21 of huge lots of soil being dumped on this particular land that you can see in the photograph. It was expensive. I don't know who did it, and I'm not interested to know who did it, but they did it with a view to this application, this proposal, I believe, because it raised the land level considerably, and yet even so, with serious loads of soil being dropped, it's still green. The only other thing that I'd like to talk about is the density, the 213 or 14 dwellings on this piece of land. If you compare the 60 on Heron Lake, obviously the lots on Lot 31 are very small. And I think that when I was standing on Rendezvous Road to take these photographs, all I could see was rural land around me, one house behind me, no other houses. This is the ambience of this part of VAS. And to us, the people of VAS, it's very important. When I've spoken to any people in Busselton or VAS...
Kate, I remind you, you're now at 5 minutes, so if you could wrap up, please.
Thank you very much. I've spoken to a lot of people in VAS and Busselton, and if I say 213 dwellings, they just laugh. The last 2 points I made on my submission was access, site access being challenging, and I believe that Cockatoo Loop must be bridged, as I've said here, because filling that section for a culvert will significantly mean more trees are removed, and the same thing for access to Rendezvous Road, which as it's only one way is acceptable. The electricity poles that are presently along on Rendezvous Road and most of Rendezvous Road, I'm curious to know what provision is being made for power because it can't go underground with that density of housing. So thank you very much. It's been a challenge putting this together. I've enjoyed it immensely. So I wish you well, and I hope that you listen to the many opposing deputations and submissions that you've received.
Thank you, Kate. Panel members, any questions of Kate Benning, please? Not at this stage. Thank you. Thank you, Kate. Our next presenter in support of the application is Denise Morgan and Andrew Wallace from Urban Design, CDP Planning and Stockland Communities. Just Mr. Wallace, is it?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, you have 3 minutes notionally as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So firstly, I just want to provide our thanks to the council and the city in working with us since the submission of the original proposal. We've been able to get to a point where we feel we've got a really balanced outcome that does consider many of the items that were just raised by the community, and we thank the voices of the community for being here and participating in the conversation as well. But overall, we feel that we've made a number of changes to reflect, particularly items like the interface at Rendezvous Road to ensure that transition from development through to rural is maintained with suitable screen planting. That led to the removal of caravan parks and other things. There was master plan spatial changes to ensure the hydrology that we've done with Dwyer and the city is suitable, and that also led to retention of additional trees in the southeast component of the site. So overall, it feels that, personal view, but it feels that some of the perceptions of the impacts that may happen from the development are sort of very high. Where we want to be part of the community at Bass, we want to add to the community at Bass. The traffic we're very comfortable with on the basis we've done peer-to-peer existing community research to understand exactly what the vehicles per day generation rates should be. And these communities do generate a lot lower traffic than a normal residential outcome. Environmental, it's important to acknowledge that there's over 78% of the existing trees that are being retained, and the proposal that you can see from the aerials and through the master planning is really focused on the existing grazing paddocks. So we do consider that, you know, I think many applicants and many councils would be happy with that sort of tree retention rate. Particularly along Rendezvous Road, we work with the city in terms of making sure that there is a requirement, obviously, for bushfire to have dual access and multiple points of access. And that left out on Rendezvous Road was tested in many different forms, but it is the most appropriate to take forward on the premise that, you know, the trees on Rendezvous Road is one of those reasons we love the site and we bought it. We don't want to disrupt those through intersection works as well. So I think really that covers primarily what we're trying to do. I don't feel like I can address all of the comments that were raised prior, but definitely in terms of environmental and traffic, I think they have been greatly considered. We did a greater environmental report because of the planning and, you know, without the guiding local structure plan, but it is proper planning. I think the way we've worked it through with the city, it's zoned appropriately, it's an appropriate use for the outcome, and we did indicate how there are no other further impediments to other proposals in the future. The environmental aspects of the wetland, the traffic aspects of Rendezvous Road, the creek being retained, the inflows of hydrology water are all embedded within the proposal. So I think it has been well tested, and we obviously are in support. Just in closing, we do acknowledge that the original RAR, we've worked after the submission date with the city on particularly the proposed conditions that we would like to see approved. So there was two components. There was one draft amended set that was provided to the DAP dated the 27th of February, which is agreed from the city and Stockland as to what the development conditions could be. And we are in support of those being adopted, but we've also made some very minor additional clarifications should the DAP be supportive of trying to simplify a couple of those. You know, we are happy with the work we did with the city on the 27th of February.
Okay, thank you. Panel members, do any of you have questions of Mr. Wallace at this stage? No?
Yes, I do. I have a lot.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Karen Hyde speaking. Thank you for your presentation. In terms of changes that you say that have been made in response to the design review panel, you'll note from the RAR that we haven't really received much detailed information on that. You sort of briefly talked about it, but what specifically have you changed as a result of that pre-lodgement?
So the pre-lodgement, yeah, so thank you for that. So originally we had obviously additional a lot in there, but that's since been moved and changed to deal with hydrology. The biggest design change was the feedback from the DRP was around trying to think about how they said we did a great job on landscaping at the front entry of Cockatoo Road and how that was interfacing with the community. They said the club precinct centrally is going and working very well, but in the south they were asking for, is there any other ability to introduce landscaping? So in the final proposal and in dealing with DVCA and retention of the Nullarbor trees in the southeastern precinct, that precinct, that corridor, if you like, has become much wider. Keeps the trees, keeps pedestrian movement through. So there's almost three hierarchies of open space internally to the site. So there's the northern male node precinct, entry precinct. There's the main recreation club, pool, gymnasium precinct, and then in the south there's the more informal, but like this east-west kind of connection from that green space and further through. The challenge with, I think the comments at the time from recollection was, there's a couple of trees in the paddocks. How could you look to keep those? But the challenge in the paddocks is that there is, a fill difference, and that's required for primarily hydrology. But then that really makes that quite complex. So we've done really well in the southeast, but that's mainly.
Okay, thank you. In terms of that other comment about dwellings and usability and amenity on the smaller lots, what have you made any modifications in that respect?
I think we've made some landscaping changes on the detailed landscaping plans, but we also, it's really important to understand who lives here and what type of customer we're actually providing this community for. So the houses, described as small lots, low amenity, but it's actually a lock and leave lifestyle that people are looking for. The customers, it's not for everybody, obviously, but it's the customers who love this product. They want to be able to use the common facilities and the open spaces that they don't maintain and look after, in higher preference to having a backyard or a shed or anything like that. So, you don't actually need a shed because you don't need to mow your grass, and you don't need all your tools because there's like a hobby shed. So there's lots of trades in the actual master plan and proposition that kind of make those things work together.
Okay, thank you. Your application report does talk a great deal, and you just have yourself, to the lifestyle of over 55s and those sorts of things. And yet in your request to edit conditions, you've asked for those conditions that relate to over 55s and requirements on title to be removed, and also reference to aged and dependent persons, even though that's the category under which this application has been considered?
Not from opposition, just from a clean planning approval in our view. So, we've had another condition supported by the RDAP that says, in age over 55, it's fine, you can leave it there. And as I noted, the draft conditions on the 27th, we're happy with that. It's just the planning approval is for that use. You can't do anything else with it. And having a restriction to support a planning condition that is applicate like the intended and approved use, it just feels like multiple layers. But not if you're more comfortable having it, it's just administrative. So it's not in opposition, it's just in clarification of the conditions.
The community facilities.
Sorry. Yeah. Oh yeah, and yeah. So there's also a lease approval that follows. Denise was my phone a friend. Thank you, friend. So there's a further approval that happens in these communities to actually lease the land, which is a DPLH site agreement lease. So within that, that sets the term of the lease, and you need to be over 55 and all the rest of it. But yeah, more than happy to leave it there. It's just by clarification.
The communal facilities, are they likely to be open to the broader public, or are they really they're
private facilities to the residents?
Okay. You talked about the site levels changing. Is that in the order of 1 metre, 2 metres, what? And how will those changes to site level, the amount of fill that you're going to have to bring in, how will that change the accessibility from a universal access point of view?
Yeah, there won't be any impact on universal access because all of the grades provide for that. In fact, the whole design of these communities, I appreciate this is the first one in the southwest regional RDAP area, but we've had 2 others that I've recognised some of the RDAP members. But essentially, the street design ensures like no trip hazards, fluid movement all the way through. So it's not a curb and asphalt design; it's inverted concrete that leads into the step-free entry to the home. They're designed for like a silver standard LHA. So from an accessibility point of view, there's no impact on fill. In terms of volume of fill, it obviously changes across the site. So the northern part of the site requires the least fill, and that's where all the services are for sewer, water connection, main entry. And as you go back to Rendezvous Road, it kind of creeps up to kind of almost approach Rendezvous Road. So there's like 2 to 3 metres in that location at the worst sort of point. So there's a lot of fill. There is obviously the edges are all maintained. There's no big retaining walls hard on the edges. The interface has been considered, particularly on the west. There's existing trees, not on our particular property, but they form part of the creek line. So, we would anticipate that both the tree preservation, the flow of water, in a broader proposal, we've indicated that they would be retained. That flow of water it connects back through our private creek, if you like, which will landscape and improve.
In terms of, we've heard from members of the surrounding community this morning how wet this area can be, and obviously you're placing fill above, but sometimes in these areas, sort of a bit like a sponge, it sort of displaces that groundwater and it goes elsewhere. There's no local water management strategy, is that correct? Because it hasn't been done under a structure plan. So you've gone for an urban water management plan. To what extent does that take account of that context hydrology?
Similar to the, I guess, the environmental flows or the trees and looking outside the boundary, there's existing flows, there are minor flows that come off Rendezvous Road more centrally to the boundary that need to be picked up and considered. So you have to look obviously at the pre and post development flows. We've done a lot of work with DWER specifically on this, the volumes of the downstream volume and flow rates and water levels that happen particularly at the crossing of Tortoise Rise there. So that's all been tested and engaged with DWER. Obviously, from our proposal, there's roof water that's coming. There's would otherwise go on the ground. So there's drainage basins, there's storage tanks, there's underwater systems. So there's.
You talked about undergrounding of power along Rendezvous Road, but that's an action by the water by Western Power. Has that been agreed to?
So it's an action by us because
action by you.
Yeah, so Western Power wouldn't care if it's above or below ground. So we'll be picking it up from above, undergrounding it. So it'll actually improve the aesthetic on that.
Does that require any vegetation clearing?
No, because there's an existing easement within the southern boundary of Rendezvous Road, so it'll be all within the field areas.
Thank you. And the boat and caravan parking now, how has that been provided for?
Well, we haven't been able to maintain that. So it was a part of the original proposal, but I think rightly so. The city felt like the distance between Rendezvous Road and the interfaces and how it was all working, because one of the RDAP responses was that they suggested making Rendezvous Road a transparent fence rather than a mist fence. So that then changes how you view through, even if you're going 100 kilometres.
So they put them on their driveways now?
Well, in most other communities, there's usually like external. It's like you live in your own house and you don't have a space for it. There's no difference. You might hire a space or put it elsewhere. So, and where we were only going to have supplementary, like there was not going to be any mass caravan bays. Only a couple.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions?
If I may.
Yes, mate.
Just a couple. One was just around the water management plan, and we all know that things can be different than the way they're modelled. So just a question around the receiving environment and the wetland and its potential impacts. Is there mitigating strategies being developed? If the models don't actually live up to reality.
Yeah, well, I think the models are based on that conservatism of the volumes and all that kind of stuff. So that's a real technical question I have to probably come back to you on. But certainly, particularly DWER spent a lot of time looking at how all the model assumptions were working. So we ended up through the feedback and consultation with both the city and DWER, changing assumptions like permeability rates on what's being directly discharged, basin sizing and depths. So all those were tested and looked at. So I think we got to a point that, and that obviously drives spill and the rest of it. I believe we got to a point that we almost had approved plans to go into the approval to sort of say, approve this document. Because we haven't quite got the documents issued to be referred and then conditioned specifically, we've obviously got a condition that we're happy with that sort of says bring us that detail, but all the in principle flows and volumes and everything has been supported.
Just another final question. There was in your report it talks about one nesting tree for cockatoos. There was a suggestion that it was I think someone said 15 nesting trees for cockatoos. Can you
Yeah, I don't know
clarify?
the exact number. I think there are some potential breeding trees rather than breeding trees, because if there was, that's right. I think there's a couple of potential breeding trees. So it depends on the classification and the volume, but I don't know specifically the number. I'm sorry.
Okay, yes, councillor Ryan.
Thank you, presiding member. Can I please ask, I think it's clause 313G of the conditions, talks about a dilapidation report. Can I please have some commentary on what houses will be involved in that dilapidation report? Because my concern is you've got heritage listed homes in close proximity, and then you've also got new homes in close proximity. What kind of undertaking will the developer do to ensure that those homes are surveyed, and will it be on an ongoing basis because you've got a structured development of this site?
I think that's a question we'd need to engage with the city officers on, to be honest, and I'm sorry we haven't gone to that level of detail. So that would be subject to that condition being, worked with.
Who would determine which properties are?
In usual practice, like the contractor, will, which we don't have on site, they would provide a proposal that the city then would need to review, be comfortable with. They wouldn't usually extend, 500 metres as such. It's like, close proximity properties. Or those that might have, so I'd have to seek advice from the engineering team. Or the city may want to comment.
Some councils actually prescribe which properties they want to have. So we'll discuss this with the council officers in a moment.
Yeah.
Thank you.
They may have a view or the condition may be suitable for that item.
It's got to be to council's satisfaction anyway. So, all right. Any further questions of Mr. Wallace?
Could I ask a question, please, relating to what Mr. Wallace has just really talked about?
Yes, councillor. Sorry. Who's asking that question?
Oh, sorry, it's Kate Redding.
Kate, sorry, you make your presentation. The standing orders don't allow for that sort of discussion.
Well, there's information that Mr. Wallace obviously doesn't have.
Well, okay, well, that could have been provided elsewhere, but if very quickly.
There's an easement on our property of about 40 metres depth from Rendezvous Road by Western Power for future underground power. So I really don't see how Lot 31 is going to be able to build right up almost to the boundary of Rendezvous.
Okay, well, that may or may not be the same easement, but
it's all along Rendezvous Road.
You mentioned that there was an easement on your property.
Yeah, there is.
Is it specifically for underground power, or
no? So easements work to protect the assets that they're. If it's above or below, it's above or below the ground. It's not specific, right? Just provide someone a legal point of access to come and look at it.
Fine. Okay.
So that sits on the southern side of our site. We've made applications to Western Power to underground. If they're going to do that in 10, 20, 50 years time, that's great. But we'd like to do it now. So we've made those applications.
Okay, thank you.
On our title, it refers to underground power.
Well, that may be your title. I'm not sure whether that's on the adjoining one. Okay. So we'll wait and see that. Okay. Do you have a copy of your title in the agenda?
No, I don't have a copy. I'm sorry.
Okay. Yes, councillor Cox.
Thank you. My question relates to, there's quite a lot of information in the report around the fact that this will be a staged development. I would just like to have some indication on whether we have any indication on what the time frame would be on the stage development, and the ingress and egress of construction vehicles. Would they be off Cockatoo Loop, or can you confirm that that would be off Rendezvous Road with appropriate temporary traffic management measures?
Yes, that's the intent. So the important part of the staging and the reason that we engaged so heavily with the city on that in determining the 27th of February draft conditions was, as it was originally written, it was like it was for an apartment, for example, where you kind of know everything before you press the go button in terms of going to build it. It's you know all detailed design for all aspects of the development. So this is obviously 213 sites. You can't build 213 houses in one go. Right. It's more like a master plan community in that regard. So the broad intent would be that obviously we'd like to come off the entry, which is Cockatoo Loop, and develop from the north down to the south. There's probably sort of 3 to 4 stages that happen probably over 3 to 4 years, depending on the take up of the market demand. The way that we build it is we never let construction traffic share a road with a residential street. So as soon as they've built the entry and that becomes a public zone, there's no other commercial traffic or construction traffic that comes through the existing community or through Cockatoo Loop. So through traffic management and applications with the city, we would be proposing that all access for construction of homes or club facilities, earthworks, etc., come from Rendezvous Road in the short term. Yeah, so we want to keep those very, very separate.
Thank you.
Okay, any further questions?
Oh, I just wanted to ask
Yes.
one more, please.
Sure.
Sorry.
That's right.
Clearing permits and referrals under EPBC. We've heard from the community quite a bit around that and their presumption that there would need to be permits and referrals. Could you please explain your position?
Yeah, so as I said, there's over 78% of the trees that have been cleared. I think some of that.
We're being retained.
I think.
Thank you. That could have gone a long way. So 78% of trees or more are being retained. Then the EPBC works based on thresholds, as you would know. So depending on what the activity is, you need to determine if it's above or below the threshold. So based on our environmentals consultancy experts report, that they don't view that the thresholds are met to go and get an EPC referral. The obligation is on the applicant to determine that. And I think some of the confusion has been that I think there was some commentary at some point, potentially, that, you know, the city requires you to do it. And you go, well, it doesn't belong as an obligation like that. So some of that conversation was just around the clarity rather than what actually happened. But
And in terms of clearing permit, which is a separate thing again.
well, clearing permit would be anything that the city would require. So obviously this would generally be covered through this approval, because DVCA have already reviewed and accepted. So
Okay, they're saying they don't need to approve anything further.
Not that I'm aware of, but
if there's a need for a clearing permit, we'll go and get it. But I don't think there's a need for a specific local DVCA clearing permit or a federal EPBC referral.
All right, thank you.
Okay, further questions? If not, thank you for all the presenters. We've gone through that. The panel will now move into discussion on the item before it. Yes, sorry, we'll go to the officers. We'll ask some questions of officers now too, because we have some foreshadowed. I think we've got the officers Emma Craddock, Andrew Watts and Joanna Wilson. Who will field the questions initially? Okay, I'll ask any of the panel members if they have questions of the council staff, council officers. Yes, Councillor Ryan.
I would like to know if, just go through my list of questions, I apologise. There were, sorry, Emma, there were a number of questions that Andrew, I asked yesterday. I think there were 3 that you were going to get some further information on. One was about the issue of the Carrick and the developers' necessity to consult with them doesn't appear to be to have happened at this stage. Can you elaborate on that, please?
Is that this Andrew? Sorry.
Yes,
No.
Andrew Watts, staff.
Sorry,
Different Andrew.
I didn't think it was my turn.
Yep. So the requirements in relation to Aboriginal heritage side of things is under Aboriginal heritage legislation rather than the Planning and Development Act. Whilst we don't have any details of exactly what consultation has occurred with Carrick or any other Indigenous parties. As I said, because it's outside of the Planning and Development Act, that is still potentially an obligation that the proponents have to do. So it's not forming part of our assessment as such, but it's the proponent still needs to be mindful of that they do have obligations. The city officers have done a search in relation to registered Aboriginal heritage sites, and the development site doesn't intersect with any registered Aboriginal heritage sites.
Thank you. The comment on the out-of-date referral guide being to 2017 and not 2022, did that change the landscape situation?
Is there an answer to that? Council staff, are we?
Conferring.
For others' information, Councillor Ryan, what were you referring to there?
It was an issue, I think, raised by Mrs. McMillan in relation to an out-of-date referral guide.
Is this a council referral or?
No, it's what the developer used in one of their addendums.
Sorry, from a city officer perspective, our understanding is that the changes between the two versions of the guidelines may mean that there's an obligation on the proponent to, in regards to referral under the EPBC Act.
There may be.
Correct.
Thank you. Okay. And information on the George v. Shire of Irwin, was there anything in that relates to this in your opinion?
So in relation to that, we haven't had sufficient time to fully review that decision to be able to provide any advice on that one.
Thank you.
That was for a totally different use as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's a different scenario. So we haven't had the opportunity to review that decision. Haven't had sufficient time to review that decision to determine whether that has any particular implications for this.
Well, I think that was quite a complicated decision of the Supreme Court or something, so we won't probably can't refer that onto this application. Okay, further questions?
Just one question around the conversation early on in the presentations from the residents about orderly and proper planning, and the fact that this proposal, there hasn't been a structure plan put in place prior to this particular proposal coming into being. I'm just some comments from the officers about the need for a structure plan, or the reason why you did skip past that if it was necessary, if it wasn't necessary, what the justification in that context was, please.
Yeah, so in regards to that, because this proposed development is actually all contained within the one site, WA Planning Manual in terms of guidance for structure plans outlines that a standard structure plan is for coordinating future subdivision and zoning of an area, and that a standard structure plan is not intended to provide development guidance. So I guess as this particular proposal, they're developing the land and the proponent is retaining the land entirely in their ownership and going to manage the development themselves, there isn't actually a subdivision process. And so it was considered that in respect to the zoning being urban development, that would ordinarily be expected that most of the land would then go to, under the structure plan, would then go to the residential zone. The type of land use is a land use that can be considered typically in the residential zone. And then the issues that are to be addressed typically in a structure plan, and including the issues that are raised in the scheme in special provision 4 that relates to this land and the structure plan requirement, are issues that can also be addressed through a detailed development application.
Thank you. I do have a question as well. The land to the east, and there was comment made that Rendezvous Road, there are other connections to Rendezvous Road from developments further east. Why was it not considered appropriate to have a full intersection with Rendezvous Road from the access road here?
So sorry, just to clarify, that's why was it not considered to be appropriate to have full access directly from this site onto Rendezvous Road?
Yes, yes. Well, it could be dual access, but having a full intersection so you can have full movement onto Rendezvous Road. Yeah.
Other portions of Rendezvous Road partly are on straighter stretches of Rendezvous. There is actually a bend that affects sight lines for this site. There are also, I guess, level differences between Rendezvous Road and the site. And in order to achieve appropriate sight lines for a full access intersection to this site, the scale of vegetation that would need to be removed and clearing of trees was not considered to be appropriate.
Okay, thank you. That answers my question. Councillor Craddock?
Thank you.
Sorry.
My question relates to the structure plan. The question is to the staff. Given that when this land was rezoned from rural to urban development, one of the rationale behind that amendment or that rezoning was that it would be subject to a very stringent structure plan. And I suppose, whilst I understand that this land is being retained by one owner, the fact that there is no structure plan required means that there's no integration of this lot of development to the surrounding lots potentially. So an overarching structure plan potentially provides better and more orderly planning in terms of road thoroughfares and lot sizes, being potentially larger lots and smaller lots, a variation in lot sizes, which potentially provides a better outcome for surrounding subdivision. So my question to the staff is, how do you justify the absence of a structure plan, and how do you feel about the fact that it lessens the integration of this development in the wider scheme of that whole area?
I guess in a sense it is correct in that, yes, with the structure plan, you would have regard for the integration with the neighbouring lots. Essentially, because of the proposal is for a lifestyle community for aged residents, the whole ethos of the development proposal is that this whole site is essentially, in a sense, gated for the residents and for that community to be contained within the lot, with access and pedestrian access through to adjoining lots, and then access onto Rendezvous Road, and then obviously also through to Heron Lakes. The reasoning behind not requiring a structure plan was, one, because of the type of development proposed, but also that the detailed water management plans, environmental management plans that were required as part of the development application would deal with those issues. And it is acknowledged that, yes, it didn't deal with the integration, but that was obviously one of the proposals, was that it was this type of development wouldn't deal with that integration in the same sense as a subdivision for just dealing with it for normal residential housing. So there was no benefit in terms of the structure plan wouldn't be able to, still wouldn't cover the fact that it was going to integrate with the neighbouring lots, because that's not what was actually proposed.
Thank you. Through the chair, some supplementary questions, if I may. Report just in relation to some of the changes requested by the proponent to the conditions, some amendments to the conditions. One of the proposed amendments is that the proponent has amended the wording to consideration of mosquito management measures, rather than perhaps something stronger like implementation, given that this is located in a close proximity to a known mosquito breeding area. I'm just wondering what the staff think about that. Sorry, that's 3.1G in the conditions. I'd just like the staff to comment on that.
I can assist with that. Yes, to be fair, the word consideration is not ideal as a planning condition, and happy for it to be amended to a word that something similar to implementation of those mosquito measures.
Thank you. The proponent has also removed the details of the bin storage area, including the design and materials and the details of the collection areas. And I was just wondering if we could get some staff commentary around that as well, please.
The city's waste management officer was generally happy with the waste management plan as provided, and was comfortable with the location of the bins and the storage areas. The reason for the condition being included for a waste management plan is that is intended that the city will undertake waste collection. The condition will just, I guess, give us that assurance that the detail needed for those arrangements to occur is to the satisfaction of the city.
Thank you. And 5.1, the proponent has removed the word section 70A relating to the certificate of title, stating that the land is located within a bushfire prone area and should be subject to a bushfire management plan. The proponents argue that the WAPC does not require a bushfire management plan for subdivision. Can I just get staff commentary around that, please?
In staff's view, that is incorrect. If this was a subdivision in a bushfire prone area, the WAPC would impose that condition, which is why staff have recommended it.
Thank you. And finally, the proponent wants to remove the city requirement for a covenant to ensure that development remains as an over 55 facility. I know you touched on this earlier. I'd just like some clarity around the consequences if we did remove that covenant.
The requirement for that covenant is so that it makes it clearer for future landowners if the land happens to change hands, that is what is approved for the land, and that is what it's restricted to.
Because otherwise you risk it just becoming them coming back to the city to apply for a development application for a subdivision.
Yes, potentially.
Thank you. That's all my questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes.
I thank Councillor Cox for those questions, as I wanted to ask some of those as well, but there's just a follow on to that last one. The applicant has suggested the deletion of condition 10 as well, which also relates to aged or dependent persons dwellings, which falls under the definition which is being used, which is the WAPC definition. Could the city staff provide some comment on whether that condition should or should not remain?
So the proposed use here is for an independent living complex, and it's as a use not listed, which is based on the definition within WAPC position statement, but that use isn't as such in our scheme at present. That does give guidance in relation to aged or dependent persons dwellings, but as that's a position statement and is guidance from the WAPC, that could be subject to change over time. We thought it was appropriate to include this condition and with the wording so that further down the track, it makes it clear how it was considered at the time this application was considered, and that it would remain to be used in the same way going forward.
Yeah, thank you for that answer. Just as a further follow-up,
yes,
please,
let's get them
presiding
all
member.
out.
Did you have any further comments on the request for changes of conditions that the applicant has posed to us in two parts? There was the first presentation and then there was a follow-up additional. I think we heard at the beginning of Mr. Wallace's presentation that you were comfortable with them, but at least the first part, but I would really like to check with you whether there is anything that you disagree with and that you feel should remain within your original RAR wording, please. I guess to start, one of the critical things was that things were to be staged in terms of a landscape plan and engineering drawings, and there's a consequential advice note around the city acknowledging that conditions can be cleared in a staged manner. Interested in your comment on that? Yeah,
so the document that says draft conditions as at 27th of the 2nd, 2025, that has been worked through between the city and the applicant, and includes at a condition 3.15 suggesting that there should be a development staging plan.
Yeah.
And then further to that, there is an advice note
Yes.
that has been added at the end, which says that the city notes that the development as approved will be constructed as a staged development in accordance with an approved staging plan, and
Yes.
conditions may be cleared in stages to the satisfaction of the city. That is what was included in that through discussions between city officers and the proponent, and we are satisfied that that can address that issue.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, just following on to that, if I may. If this was a conventional, say, subdivision, you would also consider staging of development?
Yes, correct. That the request for a staging plan would similarly, for a larger scale subdivision application, we would be seeking a staging plan as a condition of subdivision approval.
Okay, and have you addressed the issue of temporary access off of Rendezvous Road for construction traffic with construction management or traffic management to reduce the impact of construction vehicles and traffic on the residential roads leading into the estate?
In theory, we don't have an issue with having the construction traffic coming off Rendezvous Road to limit the impact upon residents in the Cockatoo Loop area. As part of your construction management plan, there is at H a requirement for details of traffic access and parking management, and that they would need to submit the temporary traffic management plans to the city for approval.
Okay,
thank you. Sorry.
No,
Karen,
that's all right. Yeah, just a point of clarification again. On condition 3.1, in the RAR, I don't have a G that relates to mosquito management, and yet it does appear in the draft conditions that the applicant refers to. So, and I think this goes to an earlier question by one of the councillors. Could you please just confirm what, in your opinion, that wording should be?
So yeah,
A to F.
So that was added as a result of discussions between city officers, city planning officers, and our environmental health staff.
Right.
Who actually sought for that to be included, and it was about consideration of mosquito management measures required by a mosquito management plan. And it was consideration because it's in with the landscaping plan condition. So it's ensuring that the landscaping doesn't result in areas that might collect stagnant water and the like, which creates an environment that promotes mosquito breeding.
Yeah, okay, but earlier you said it didn't need to say consideration of, is that correct?
If anything, you could probably delete the words consideration and just have mosquito management measures required.
Yes.
Which would obviously remove any ambiguity with that wording.
All right.
Mason, just possibly it should say implementation of any mosquito management plans required, or integration of them into the landscaping plan. That's what
yes, that's correct.
Probably integration.
Possibly 3.3 should also say the mosquito management plan to be prepared and implemented to the satisfaction of the city of Busselton. We'll catch you on that.
That's effectively what the header at 3 actually requires.
Yeah.
So that says all of these plans have to be
submitted
approved,
approved
and implemented to the satisfaction of the city.
All right. Okay.
Further questions, Karen? Councillors?
Just a quick one on that. Slightly uncertain response in terms of clearing permits or otherwise, and environmental referrals. Would the city normally have an advice note to that effect?
Certainly, we do a lot of the time have an advice note in respect to that. And that is actually at 16 there, of number 16 of the advice notes does actually include some considerations around tree removal and other approvals.
All right,
under the
thank
legislation.
you. Thank you for that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Further questions of the staff? No. Just quickly, Mr. Wallace, do you have any?
No, I was just trying to help clarify some of the commentary that has been covered. So thank you.
It's been thrashed out. Okay, thank you very much. All right, well now we will move into the panel discussion on the item. And in order to do so, we will need a mover and a seconder for the recommendation as published in the RDAP. Do I have a mover?
I'm happy to move, presiding member.
Moved Karen Hyde. Purpose of discussion, do I have a seconder? Yes, Mr. Moritz is the second. Karen used to speak to the item, please.
Thank you. Takes quite a lot of consideration, over 900 pages of an agenda for one item, and an awful lot of technical details. I guess the starting point is that this parcel of land and adjacent parcels up to Rendezvous Road have been reviewed and have been considered suitable for urban development under the city's local planning strategy and have been zoned accordingly in the scheme. There is a presumption, therefore, that they would be developed, subject to either a structure plan or meeting consideration of the special provisions at 4 of the scheme. Now, the city's RAR has gone to great lengths to explain the discussions that have happened between the proponent, the city, and the various state agencies in consideration of those specific environmental values, and how these values have either been retained or where some impact has been incurred as a result of the development, how those impacts have been mitigated and managed. And certainly the officer's report and those comments from the referral agency seem to be satisfied that those requirements of special provision 4 have actually been met through the technical work supporting this development application. It is, however, of a scale where one would ordinarily see that a structure plan would have some level of benefit in terms of integration. And there are a number of matters which still require detail, specifically regarding drainage and urban water management, the retention and thriving of not only existing but future vegetation, which at the moment are subject to further conditions and approvals and will come forward through the detailed design. But having said that, as I think we heard from the officer, it is a self-contained development. So beyond the matters of traffic, which is dealt with through traffic management, beyond the matters of water management, which is dealt with through a condition, materiality, which is also dealt with through condition, it is a very self-contained development, which has its own community facilities, etc. But nonetheless, there is also still a condition to make contributions to the broader city's community facilities as well, which is formulated under the city's scheme. So I'm comfortable that notwithstanding there not being a structure plan, that a great deal of detail has gone into this proposal, and that the technical matters have been either thoroughly assessed at this point or to be considered just to finalise through conditions of approval. We're essentially also given a package of elements. We're not dealing with individual properties. We're actually dealing with a package which will be rolled out in future. But there's certainty about the scale, there's certainty about the yield, there's certainty about the future occupation, particularly if we were to retain those conditions that talk to the age group that this is intended for, and the design specifications which go with designing for that age group. So the RAR is generally very positive. We heard from the applicant that they have responded to the best of their ability to the design review, which was an external panel. But I think further work could be done in terms of the further detail on the landscape, further detail on the materiality to ensure that the character and the context is really considered and embedded in this as you move forward through the development. So I wholly support those conditions requiring further detail on the landscape and the materiality, which I think will help it fit better and transition better to the established area. But I think that will come forward as you go through your staging. It's obviously a 5-year build out. That said, I'm comfortable to support the application, but there would be a number of amending motions.
Yes, well, I think we'll give the number of them. We will deal with them individually.
Okay.
And if there are others that can be dealt with en bloc, we shall do that. But I think we would need to start the process and see how we go.
I'll do them individually, presiding member. Thank you for your guidance.
All right.
So I would start therefore with the capitalised words prior to commencement of any works conditions and delete that word and.
So
and
that's
then,
amending motion 1.
Yeah, but could I also include in that itemised condition 3, which would also delete that word and any, pardon me, from that first introductory sentence.
Okay, so that's amending motion 1. Delete the 2 words any.
Yep.
In the heading. And
would you like me also to add into that for 3.1 a landscaping plan for each stage? That
yes,
includes the following?
Yep, do that.
Okay, that's amending motion 1.
You've got that, okay?
So the last bit.
Oh, we could also, yes, include in that amending motion the addition of G, which is integration of mosquito management measures required by the mosquito management plan. So that's my amendment proposed for 3, including 3.1.
So just to summarise.
Deletion of the word any from the capitalised introduction, deletion of the word any from dot point 3, condition 3, editing the introduction to 3.1 to read a landscaping plan for each stage that includes the following, and the addition of G, integration of mosquito management measures required by the mosquito management plan.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a seconder for that?
Yes.
Moritz, do you wish to speak to that?
I think it's probably self-explanatory, presiding member. It's really giving greater clarity to what's required on the basis that this is a staged development, but also given respect to the fact that it is in an area of mosquito breeding. So simply giving greater certainty to what that landscape plan should include.
Okay, thank you. Mike, do you wish to speak to it at all?
No, I think it's all self-explanatory.
Okay, now I wish to speak for or against that amendment? If not, I'll put the amendment. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Amendment number 2.
3.2, I think the applicant just required some adaptation of the wording there, which seems reasonable. Deleting the words "be modified to include" and inserting new words "demonstrate how." So housing option 4 to demonstrate how a dedicated storage area, etc., residential design codes volume 1 can be provided.
Okay. Moving that as amendment
Yes,
2.
please.
Do I have a seconder? Mike Moritz. Do you wish to speak to that at all, Karen?
No, I think it's really just a change of wording.
Thank you. I'll put the item to a vote. If does anyone wish to speak for or against? If not, I'll put the item for a vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous again. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm moving to 3.11 at this point. 3.11 engineering. What was?
Okay, so that's.
I was going to insert the words after engineering drawings and specifications for each stage.
Okay, so that's amendment 3.
Yeah.
Okay, do I have a seconder for that? Yes, Mike Moritz. You wish to speak to it?
Only that this is consistent with our earlier discussion, presiding member. Thank you.
Fine. Any other panel member wish to speak for or against? If not, I'll put the amendment. All in favour? That's unanimous as well.
Can I just ask what happened to 3.9, a waste management plan?
I haven't proposed that, but others may wish to.
Want to do them in sequence?
Pardon?
Do you want to catch it now or leave it till the
Well,
end?
you can, at any time you can move an amending motion. So if somebody wishes to jump in at this stage, it's still with Karen because, yes, okay. Finally, just for clarification, Karen, please proceed.
3.12, insertion of the words at the end of the first sentence and approved by the city prior to the commencement of any building works, the introduction of those words prior to the commencement of any building works. And I think we could also add a condition 3.15 as well, which requires a development staging plan.
Okay, so that's amendment number 4. Okay, do I have a seconder for that? Mike Moritz, yes. Karen, you wish to speak to that?
Just that this is obviously still the stage development, so these amendments are appropriate to give clarity.
Good. Okay, anyone wish to speak to that amendment? If not, I'll put the amendment to a vote. All those in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Karen, proceed. You have the floor.
Yes. I think it brings me to advice note 18 in what I would like to change.
Okay.
And it's a new advice note 18. I think it's amendment 5, and the wording of that advice note is: the city notes that the development as approved will be constructed as a stage development in accordance with an approved staging plan. Conditions may be cleared in stages to the satisfaction of the city.
Okay. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Mike Morris, thank you. Wish to speak to the item?
No, thank you.
No. All right, anyone, any other panel member wish to speak for or against? If not, I'll put that to a vote. Amendment number 5, all in favour? That's unanimous as well.
Thank you.
Okay.
And just to just to wrap up my comments as mover, I determined not to move a number of the other deletions related to restricted covenants for age and for age-independent persons, because I felt that it was important that there was that level of certainty, and this development approval runs with the land. It's not with the operator as such. So the intention of this development is for over 55s, and therefore I'm comfortable that that is clear within the conditions of approval. And likewise, I was quite comfortable with the detail required of the waste management plan, which runs, and needs to be dealt with prior to commencement of works. But I won't stand in the way of anybody else that feels they wish to move those amending motions. Thank you.
Thank you. So, as seconder, Mr. Morris, would you like to speak to the item?
I'm comfortable with all of those. I do, however, want to move the motion around 3.9, the waste management plan, to do the editing that was suggested by the agreement between the staff and the proponents. It's still required for a management plan that's approved by the council, but without the specificity of the condition.
Okay, so that's amending motion 6, moved by Mr. Marge. So I'll just clarify that. So what exactly are you suggesting? So the waste management plan condition is 3.9.
Yeah, so the wording would be a waste management plan, full stop.
Yep.
And remove the words indicating and the part 1 and part 2 that have been suggested, because it is a plan that is approved by the council.
Get to the actual condition 3.9. So you're deleting 3.91 and 3.92. Okay. So you've moved that. Is there a seconder? There being no seconder, the amending motion lapses. Okay. Do you wish to proceed on the item itself? Speak in support of it as a seconder?
No, overall, I'm very comfortable that a detailed assessment has been undertaken by the city's officers with the support of the referral agencies. And there's been a significant refinement of the conditions as part of that process. I think there's going to be a range of ongoing significant work done as the stage development occurs. And that will provide the opportunity for significant review and enhancement of any of the outcomes as the development starts to be implemented. So I'm comfortable that we've got a good package of conditions and a good process moving forward that can deal with anything that changes along the way. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do any of the other panel members wish to speak for or against the recommendation and amendments proposed? Councillor Ryan?
Oh, this is for the amendments. No, I don't have anything further. The substantive notion I have like to speak against.
Okay, fine. You can go ahead and do that. Thank you.
Now?
Yes.
Not for the amendments, for the substantive motion?
No, the substantive motion, because the amendments.
The amendment's now part of the substantive.
Okay.
Okay, yes.
Thank you. So I speak against. I don't support this application in its current form. And the reasons are the council resolved on the 25th of September 2019 to require, and it was unconditional, to have a structure plan over the whole scheme amendment area. The Minister in his wisdom made amendments. However, SP 4.1 states a structure plan is to be prepared for the entire special provision area unless demonstrated to the satisfaction of WAPC that a separate structure plan for lots 176, 9000 and 201 Rendezvous Road can be prepared and implemented, etc. Clause 2 says including lots 224 and 634, now lot 31, says the lots contain important environmental values, including remnant vegetation, potential habitat for Commonwealth and state listed threatened fauna species, ecological linkages and wetlands. Structure planning, highlighted, shall require these values to be retained, managed and protected. Therefore, it's talking about structure planning once again. The point being, once again, this gazetted amendment required a structure plan. Why does this developer feel that there is no need for a structure plan? Mrs. Redding also talks of the vast structure plan and town centre, which is testament to how it should be done. This application is devoid of such a structure plan and is a staged development. In relation to clause 67 of the DAP practice notes, we are to have regard to H, any structure plan, any activity plan or local development plan that relates to the development. And once again, there isn't one. The compatibility of the development with its setting, including the relationship of the development to adjoining land or on other land in the locality, including but not limited to the likely effect of the height, bulk, scale, orientation and appearance of the development, and a further clause which states the impact of the development on the community as a whole, notwithstanding the impact of the development on particular individuals. Staff also noted earlier that the reference to the developer that used the 2017 out-of-date report may require referral to the EPA. I don't support this application in the absence of a structured plan, especially in light of the road development, such as those issues raised by Mr. Hammond, and its effects on surrounding landholders in the new estate and indeed those on Rendezvous Road and the wider area. However, the speed limit is 100 kilometres an hour on Rendezvous Road, and whilst 55 is not old, especially when you're already at that age, the aged may have issues in accessing this road when the speed limit of 100 kilometres per hour prevails. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else wish to speak to the item? Councillor Cox.
Just in that, I would like to foreshadow a further amendment, if I may.
Yes, you may.
It would be a further advice note. So it would be an additional advice note that the city would require that implementation of the landscaping plan for the buffer along Rendezvous Road and within the northern wetland to be planted within the first planting season concurrently with the commencement of stage 1. So just to ensure that the screening buffer to Rendezvous Road was planted at the beginning of stage 1.
You could move that as a condition, I think. It would be
as a condition, yes, as opposed to an advice note. I'm happy to do that.
Okay. All right. So you're moving an amending motion number 7. I got lost there. And did you get the wording for that, Claire, or we can get it off the off the top? Okay, thank you. All right, do I have a seconder for that? Yes, Karen Hyde, thank you. Yes, Councillor Cox, you wish to speak to that amendment.
I think it's fairly self-explanatory. I think that the city would just like some assurance that the landscaping buffer was planted initially, so that by the time those stages are completed in 3 to 4 years, that's well established along Rendezvous Road to provide screening to those properties across the road, rather than an allowance for that to be done further at a later stage where it won't be as mature. So I think if we can require that to be done at the commencement of the development, there will certainly be advantages for surrounding properties in terms of a mature buffer by the time it's completed.
Okay, thank you. Karen, you wish to speak to that?
Yes, I concur with Councillor Cox's statements. The city obviously does have a policy which they've applied consistently in this area, and the area for the buffer is somewhat reduced as a result of the layout of this area. So I think advanced planting to give those new trees and a variety of species, of native species, hopefully, a chance to establish would again go towards better integration and better amenity and setting for this development as it is staged.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else wish to speak for or against the amendment? If not, I'll put the amendment. All those in favour? It's carried unanimously. Yes, councillor Cox, you wish to speak to the substantive motion? Recommendation?
This is a difficult one for me. I will be speaking in favour of the application. In my opinion, this land potentially should have remained rural residential and not been rezoned to urban. However, it has been rezoned to urban development in 2021, and therefore, as has been mentioned already, residential development is allowed in this area. It is unfortunate that the provision for a structure, it would have been ideal if a structure plan could have been applied to this development I think it would have resulted in good and orderly planning if that was the case. However, I also acknowledge that given that it is in one landowner is developing the entire lot, and they have submitted a very detailed development application with very comprehensive conditions and advice notes, I think that there is not a compelling reason to refuse this application. Therefore, I will be supporting this application. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I will also speak to the item, and up front I am supporting it. The application, as has been mentioned by all speaking for it and the council staff, the land under local planning scheme 21 is zoned urban development, and it allows for residential subdivision and group dwellings, and subject to special provision number 4, and that has been adhered to. There's a range of environmental requirements recognising values to remnant vegetation, fauna, water management and groundwater management in SP4, and that has been undertaken by the proponents. The use as a use not listed has been tested and is appropriate for the urban development zone. The requirement for a structure plan, I agree that perhaps it should have been undertaken earlier. However, the council staff have tested that with the Department of Planning, and it's deemed not to be a mandatory requirement, but and given that it's a self-contained development, the impact of that development on the site and the amenity of locality in terms of just the environmental and residential amenity has been tested. The proponents have been required to prepare up to 9 different management plans, from water management, landscaping plan, bushfire management, acid sulphate soils, lighting management, waste management, construction management, and a construction environmental management plan, a tree protection plan, and a mosquito management plan. I think that's 10 actually. So whilst there are concerns expressed about the impact on the locality, the proponents have prepared a detailed assessment of their proposal and in support of it, and they have been through a design review, an independent design review panel assessment, and have also received support, albeit qualified, from DBCA and WER. In terms of whether they require any further referrals, and or to those agencies or through the Aboriginal Heritage Protection process, well, that's up to the proponents. If they get caught up with that, then that's something that they'll have to address in due course. So given that the council officers have prepared a detailed, and I might commend them for that, because it is a detailed assessment of the proposal, I am supporting it. That being the case, all panel members have spoken. I'll leave it up to Karen Hyde to close debate on the item.
Thank you, Presiding Member, and thank you everybody for your contribution to the debate. I agree that through earlier planning, some of these considerations regarding hydrology and environment potentially could have been investigated further, but it's not something that we can wish for now. Those earlier plans have been endorsed and adopted, and they form the framework in which we now consider this application. A structure plan, in lieu of a structure plan, I should say, I'm satisfied that the technical detail that has been provided by the owner, and it is dealing with a single lot and a single owner, is adequate and has been assessed thoroughly by both the local government officers in all of their technical business units and also across the range of state government agencies, and that has been satisfactorily endorsed and agreed upon as enabling this development to occur and to consider adequately those requirements of the special planning environmental area. I'd likewise, to Councillor Cox, find that there are really insufficient reasons, given all of that, to actually refuse the development. On the matter of traffic, the local community have expressed some concerns, but the traffic impact statement has demonstrated that this can be managed safely within the capacity of the road, well within the capacity of the road at Cockatoo Loop. I am comfortable that those conditions that we have amended and that are remaining will facilitate further integration of this development through design development, specifically through the skills of the proponents team. And clearly the proponent has demonstrated that this is much in demand as a typology and a product. It will create a level of affordability and convenience for downsizers. And as we grow older, that's a very important thing, to remain part of a community and part of the familiar places that we have lived in previously, or to enjoy a level of economic security as we move forward through our age. So I'm happy to support. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, as we close debate on the item, I will now put the item with the amendments to the vote. All those in favour? 4, against, 1. The item is carried as amended. Thank you very much. Okay, to complete the agenda, I'll move to item 4 on the agenda for RDAP applications. There are none. Item 5, section 31, SAPLI considerations. There are none. And on part C, SAT applications and Supreme Court appeals are listed. And item 2 on part C of the agenda is closing of the meeting at 11:21 a.m. Thank you, participants, councillors, staff members, presenters. Thank you.
Thank you.